I want to remind us that this notion of Black teacher recruitment and retention, I've said to a few of you, is not just a Baltimore City problem. It's not just a Maryland problem. It's not even just a U.S. problem. In the UK and in places in Europe, they call them BME, Black Minority Educators, and have this almost the same data, side by side, the same stats, the same percentages as we do, a little bit better, right? And so just remembering that, just to seed us and frame this kind of conversation within the 400-year experiment that this country is. And that is not to say that we have to move at a snail's pace or that we can't make progress, but that's to say that it's going to take a lot of little steps to tear down the really big elephant that we're trying to beat down. And so sometimes it can feel really daunting and like we're not moving anywhere and we can't do anything unless we just go in there and burn down MSDE. But I would just ask us to kind of make sure that we're contextualizing our work in this group within the larger kind of system that is before us. Okay? All right, so I'm going to start off by just kind of grounding us as usual. Jeremy's going to come up and provide some district information, some things that were requested last time of this group. There should be a sign-up sheet going around. Please make sure you sign it up. I will do a much better job of reaching back out to you guys. Great feedback on that. I have not reached out to you, so please make sure you fill it out, and I'll email everyone later tonight or tomorrow morning with next steps. And Jeremy's going to also talk to us a little bit about kind of where we've come from within the working group from July till now to contextualize this conversation further.
Can you remind us who you are?
Oh, sure. Sorry. I'm Angela Harvey Bowen. I actually got my start to teaching here in Baltimore City back in 2004, 2005. I currently do work with Teach for America in Delaware. And I do a lot of adult learning design and facilitation here on my own, supporting a few organizations in this kind of work, strategic planning and diversity, equity, and inclusion work.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
So the first thing I want to do is thank you for being here. This is our third one of these. So this is the third month where we've had a public meeting open to anyone who wants to come and be a part of this working group. Did some of you in the room get a robocall last week as a reminder? Mm-hmm. Great. So that was the first time we sent out robocalls, so hopefully that served as a good reminder for you or a good first invitation for some folks who had signed up to indicate interest but hadn't yet joined us at one of our meetings. I also put up here, and you grabbed one of different variations of a flyer, so we created this so forward thinking, there would be something that we could share with anyone and everyone about the dates that this working group will meet publicly over the next 9 months as well. So the locations are not there because a couple members of this group had offered early on to identify different locations across the city, different schools. So we've been at District Office, we've been at Dorothy I. Height, we're now at Forest Park. So we expect that we'll be in a variety of other schools over the rest of the year. You can see on here the 4 topics that we talked about. I've recently said in conversations with many of you that we as a group decided to pick the one that was least focused and least narrow for our first topic. So it has given us the opportunity to talk about a lot of different things that are wide in scope, and therefore there's a lot of open conversations, and we're trying to, given that this is our third of 3, focus on increasing teacher retention. We want to, after this meeting as a group, be able to do some wrap-up of this first topic, knowing that it will certainly weave into the other topics that we talk to throughout the year as well. The other thing, I just sent around separately a different page that looks like this. So you see some headlines on here just from some research papers. I am sharing this because our CEO, Dr. Santelises, has invited and confirmed that Dr. Ashley Griffin who currently works at Education Trust, is actually going to come and for an event on November 27th. And let me get it right. November 27th. You will notice that that's an existing date for this working group. So we as a working group, after today, can decide whether we just want to replace that meeting that day with the event that Dr. Ashley Griffin will be here for, or if we want to come up with a different November date. So what I shared with you are a variety of research reports that Dr. Griffin has authored or co-authored in recent years about this very topic. So I'm really looking forward, and Dr. Santelises is really looking forward as well to Dr. Griffin coming and joining us to talk through some of these things that Angela shared are beyond Baltimore, beyond Maryland, and even beyond the U.S. So, I am referring to some notes here that I had because as we've talked about teacher retention, a lot of different things have come up. We've talked about wanting to expand our understanding of why teachers do choose to leave the district. We've talked about barriers to certification or challenges with certification and recertification. Different levels of supports that different new teachers receive from the district, from other sources, from their own preparation programs. We've talked a little about the teacher career pathways and looked at some of what the process is for someone to move up in both their career and their salary. We talked about mentoring. We talked about how teachers do or do not feel valued in their roles and in their schools, and how teachers feel about their administration, how teachers are assigned or how teachers are choosing schools that they go to as well. So we talked about a lot of different things that are a part of retention. So I appreciate that today Angela has us working in small groups for some of the time to talk a little more specifically about a couple of these. But I do have some data that has been requested, so I think that this will in part maybe be illuminating and in part will definitely introduce lots of new questions because members of this group have said they want to see, like, by school, what is the percentage of teachers who are Black or African American. So that's what this is. We've talked a little bit here about what this might actually, what other data points might be helpful for us here, and I think that's something that the working group can say if you want, like, other data to help understand this more, but as a starting point at least you can see. I think I said before, we have schools that are actually where 100% of the teachers are African American. We have schools where 10% of the teachers are African American across the city. So I really am just sharing this today, knowing that it's been requested from members of the group, and we've had a conversation about that. It may actually be a helpful reference point, regardless of which of these three conversations you're a more specific part of today. Or to the extent that it's not helpful for your direct conversation today, it's a good reference point for our continuing conversations. And I think that is really what I had to say, except I appreciate your continued participation in the group, all of the ideas that people are bringing to the group, especially because I agree with what Angela said at the beginning, that this is a complex issue as we think about recruitment and retention of Black teachers. I will say personally, I was in this role in a different district for 3 years, and in that district, it is not as many students are African American, but way, way fewer teachers were African American. And in that district, in a couple of years, we were able to triple the number of African American teachers hired. We were able to do it there because they had paid almost no attention to this. So they weren't already recruiting at HBCUs. They weren't already ensuring that their marketing materials showed diverse teachers. They weren't already doing some things that we've been doing for a while here, so it actually was easier to make more dramatic and quicker change So I appreciate like you being here and dealing in the complexity of what it will take for us to increase the percentage even more.
Jeremy,
Yeah.
what year is this from?
This is current.
It's not right.
Okay, what did you see?
Well, because I work at Booker T and it says 100% of the teachers are black and they're not.
Okay. Well, in our data system, everyone who is a classroom teacher at that school has identified that they are African American. So in self-reported data,
So
they
we probably
could.
want to take a look at that. Because that's incorrect.
Okay.
And is that specifically full-time teachers?
It is anyone who is a classroom teacher. So
identity trying to come up. Think about
Yeah.
that. If there's 20 teachers, right? Only 15 submit their thing. They
Right,
ain't black.
those other ones don't come up.
yeah,
Because
I'll
you
say
can't
that
require
there
somebody
are.
to legally put themselves in the race. So it's accurate based on, if I'm correct.
Who reports?
Report, it's optional. They don't always say I'm
Also, it just depends on their certification. You are not identified as a certified teacher, correct? You may be in the classroom serving a role as a teacher, but if you are a long-term sub, I'm just using it as an example, there are other circumstances that might not be what you said.
Yeah.
That part is definitely true. So to be more specific, so this is anyone who is in a full-time classroom teacher role, and it does exclude about 1% of our teachers who are most likely newer teachers who their data is just being entered. But it's a very small. It's like 40 teachers who are not represented here.
Across the district.
Yeah,
Or the
across
ones
the
who didn't
district.
report.
Everyone
they
eventually
reported,
has
they-
to choose something.
Oh, they did?
Yeah. Yeah.
And is it full-time, certified, uncertified, just full-time, doesn't matter what their credentials are?
It's anyone who is in a classroom teacher role, who is not a substitute.
Great. And then, is it possible at another time to see what the total number of teachers are, so then I know what 44% of what that number is? So
The numbers by school?
yeah, like what's the total number of teachers at the school, and then this percentage will mean something. It means something else when you know a percentage of what. So if that's possible at another time to get the total number of teachers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'll bring Jeremy back up a little bit later to just kind of close out this particular topic for us. As you know, we're going to be moving through some of the others. I'm going to invite Dion Medley, who works directly with our mentor program here in the district. She's going to share with us just kind of the genesis of the program, how it runs, et cetera, et cetera. She does have to leave a little bit early, so she has a colleague here, Shauna, who will help us. But just to kind of frame how we got to this point, you know, Jeremy listed off all of those things that we've been talking about since July. We made some attempts at our last public meeting to kind of, you guys remember the 5 whys, to really try to get down to the root cause of some of those problems. Most of those problems that were prioritized fell into these 3 categories that we'll talk about today, which was teacher mentoring, teacher certification, and what was the other one? What was group number 1? The surveys. Which really it wasn't a survey. It wasn't, the topic wasn't surveys. It was, we need to know more about why people are leaving. If you guys remember in the very first public meeting, we had a large chunk of people for whom the survey said unidentified reason for why they were leaving. So this is where that came from. So that's why we're kind of funneling a little bit more so tonight. So mentoring has been a big hot topic for us for the last couple of meetings. So we'll ask Dion to come up and just kind of set the record straight a little bit around what's happening in terms of mentoring in the district. And we'll take a few questions, and to the extent to which she can stay and answer those, or that Shauna can lean in, we'll do that.
So I'm going to start by inviting Shauna to come up. Shauna is actually my coordinator for mentoring, and I just found out that I was on the agenda to present. So can you check to see if you have this paper, and maybe we can provide an overview as well as answer questions around what the mentor program is for the district right now. So we'll start first by giving a brief overview of the mentoring program and provide maybe a little context around what's on both of these pages. So throughout the district, let me just start by saying I was a 13-year teacher in Baltimore City. I was a full-time release mentor at one time, and I did work in a school that had a 60% percentage of new teachers versus total teaching staff. And that has been almost 15 years ago. And at that time, we did have a full-time release model. So that person was centrally funded. That person supported the school throughout the entire year and worked with the principal and other staff in the building to retain and help develop those teachers in their first through third years of teaching. So as we sort of fast track to 2018, that program no longer exists. What we now have is primarily a composite of various levels of mentoring that you sort of see on this page. The majority of our mentors are peer mentors in the district. They are school-based staff. Principals make decisions on who they identify as a mentor, and we provide sort of the criteria which is aligned to what is required per COMAR. My office primarily supports the process of developing mentors by providing a professional development. We don't supply mentors to schools, but we support and develop those mentors who principals have identified in their buildings to support their teachers. The last 3 years, we've partnered with New Teacher Center, based out of Santa Cruz, California, in order to provide that consistent professional development to mentors, so that we could, across the district, our goal was to sort of norm the learning and the development of mentors, so that we could sort of establish a standard across all schools around those types of tools and resources and how they coach new teachers. And we're now in our third year. There are several components of the program. We support approximately 282 mentors across the district, because for the most part they're all peer school-based mentors who have their own classroom responsibilities. Throughout the year we hold 5 professional learning series, 7 throughout the year, that range the gamut of introduction to coaching, to analyzing student work, coaching for equity, and those mentors who are identified by their principals attend those sessions. They also have mentor forums in which they come and they work through a problem of practice. They get to engage with another mentor who can help coach and support each other, and it's an opportunity for them to sort of share out around what's happening in their schools and how the implementation of the learning is taking place. Anything you want to say, Shauna?
I think you covered pretty much everything. One piece is that the mentoring, as it's moved through the years, this third year of the program, while they are doing PD now, this is part of our teacher leadership development. So the people who started in the mentoring with the partnership in New Teacher Center 2 years ago are now people who are going to be trained in that type of professional development so that they can train more mentors as we go along to sustain the program, because everything just started in the last 2 years. And each person that started last year, now we have, at this point, we have 3 cohorts. So we have year 1 mentors, year 2 mentors, and year 3 mentors. So the year 3 mentors are the teachers who have been through all of the New Teacher Center professional development and are utilizing those types of tools and the training that we've been putting in place there to come into the school-based mentoring. But the majority of the mentors, because it's not a position, it's not a paid position, so mentors receive 2 AUs for 30 hours of support through the school year. And it's broken down in different ways depending on the school and the number of mentors that exist in the school, just like the percentages that are different at each school. The percentages of new teachers at each school vary very widely. So some schools may have 75% of the staff is new. And there's schools where there's so many new teachers that it's very difficult to find someone who has enough veteran years behind them to qualify to even be a mentor. But one thing I wanted to identify was that while mentoring is a piece that is directly connected to new teacher support, there are other supports that are existent within each network that's on top of just the mentor. The mentor is the school-based support for that new teacher. However, the mentor, if Jeremy's a mentor, he has a whole class of his own, and then he's supporting maybe 5, or it might be 10, depending on his school. And if his principal was able to find or see through their staff that they had more than one person that could fulfill that role, and that they trust enough to do the development of another adult and be able to really take them in their hands and support them in a very comprehensive manner that we want. That's a difficult thing to find in some schools. So I have schools reaching out to me saying, what do we do? I only have one person, and I have 12 teachers that are new. And when we say new, we mean first year, second year, and third year. And the first year of the fourth year, they're tenured now, so they're not required by law to have support anymore. But in that first year, that's the one that's the most tender. So that's the one we pay attention to the most, because that could really make or break you. So in those schools, when there's other staff that is existent within a network, we have the academic content liaisons in math and literacy that are in each network. So they're also aware of who those teachers are in the school as well. So what we try to do is collaborate as much as possible with those people, and as well with Teach for America or VCTR. If that teacher is an alternative certification teacher, there's also a connection that happens there. So it's not just the mentor who's touching that person. There's a lot of other people who are coming in with support. And then on top of that person, there's usually a staff developer at the school. And sometimes the staff developer is the mentor as well as the testing coordinator, as well as many other roles. So knowing when you hear the word mentor, that's not the only thing they do. Now, I wish we had it to the point where we used to have Blum mentors, but that was the only thing they did, and they only focused on support for new teachers. That would be a wonderful world. That's my pie in the sky, hopefully one day. But that takes a lot of money. And so maybe one day we'll get there. But for now, we're trying to do the best we can to make sure that we have high-quality teachers who are being chosen and designated as mentors. And principals have all the specific criteria that they need to choose those people. And then my job is to make sure that those people have all the tools and everything they need to be able to support the teachers. And then they reach out to me if they're struggling or if they need support or any reason whatsoever, or they need feedback. Any of those reasons, I support them and help them with that. Professional development is our main thing, that we want to make sure that everyone's using a consistent framework for feedback, for looking at planning conversations, looking at equity in their classroom. So we really are trying to give the mentoring program a really deep facelift. And I think now we're like in the third phase of it, and it's really coming together. It takes a long time for something like that to really make a dent and for everyone to really see it at its fullest impact. But that's basically where the mentor program is at right now.
Can I ask a question? So since you all don't select the mentors, you don't provide the mentors, but the training, who selects the mentors? What's the process in selecting the mentors? I think it's something that came up for me.
The principals designate who the mentor is at the school site. There's a criteria that we've created for the principals, and so that is shared with them, and it's been the same way for the last about 5-6 years now. And a lot of the criteria comes from what is stated in COMAR for Maryland, but most of the criteria are things like being a highly qualified teacher, having a certain number, at least 5 years or more of satisfactory teaching experience, having really good interpersonal skills, and being able, because even though you're a great teacher doesn't always mean you're a great coach for another adult. So those types of things the principals are supposed to really look at and reflect on to say, is this person someone I want in front of our new people to really help coach them and move them through the year? And then they designate the teachers that way to become a mentor. And then, like I said, sometimes there's one or two or more, depending. Some schools have the luxury of being able to put one per grade level.
One last question I have now released everybody else. I hear them mumbling, so I know they got some questions.
Okay.
We've talked a lot in our working group about mentoring and coaching being very different, non-interchangeable things. What is you all's philosophy around what mentoring is and what it's intended to do?
So mentoring is supposed to be, I used to joke and say that in the old days, we used to do mentoring was a tissue for your issue kind of support, where it was more of emotional based, emotional support. You know, what do you need? Let me know what you need. And now it's really turned into more of an instructional support, where I'm really looking at your needs, but I'm looking at your instructional needs for your classroom. So what do you need as a teacher to really be the best teacher in your classroom? So if that means I need to help you with planning, or if that means I need to watch you teach a lesson, or if that means I need to look at student work with you. It depends on what the need is of that teacher. And whereas before it used to be a mentor would come in and kind of prescribe what that teacher needed, now it's more what does the teacher need, and together we prescribe that, what that looks like together in collaboration, not I'm going to just do what I think it should be done for you. There might be some mentoring moves in there to help with that, but most likely it's supposed to be in a collaborative way where you're not spoon-feeding the teacher. Our philosophy is that we want teachers to be able to be reflective practitioners so that they can think about what their teaching moves are rather than me telling you, because I'm not trying to make a mini-me of me. I need you to be the teacher that you are. And every teacher has a different personality that they have in the classroom, so we need to pull that piece out and then be able to make them the person that they need to be in front of those kids.
And so the new teacher centers model that we currently use, the mentors sort of practice everything that Shauna just spoke of in those professional learning series. So they're learning how to have culture conversations. They're learning when to be facilitative or collaborative. They also are learning how to walk a teacher through analyzing student work. They're learning how to engage teachers in coaching conversations. So we are trying to create sort of a structure where we set the standard for what it means to be a mentor, and we provide them with all those tools and resources so that they can actually support those teachers in a way that's really focused on improving their practice so that we can improve student outcomes.
At what point in the school year is a teacher paired with a mentor?
Right from the beginning.
Meaning what?
From day one.
But these are new. I'm hearing that this is all new teachers. So what we've been talking about in terms of just mentorship, I think, is only applying to new teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Day one.
So at our last meeting, what we discussed was like new teachers receive this at New Teacher Institute, and we had like 2 new teachers last time here. I don't know if they returned this time, but they didn't know anything about this. And then those of us who've been in the school system are saying that this paper isn't true. And so I'm just trying to, and I heard, I don't remember what your name is, but Dion, I heard what you said about capacity, but what we're saying and what's happening is different, and then that's where this frustration comes in, and then people can't hear the truth. So the truth has to be printed and told. So this is the idea of what Baltimore City would like, but this isn't happening in every school where they're first year, second, third year teachers. And all principals, most principals, it seems from what we were talking about and just some of us being in here 13, 15 years, this has not been the experience, and this is what people expect. And then this is what happens when you get to evaluation time. Is you had a mentor or you're being evaluated. The way the evaluation tool is set up with that this is happening. And if this isn't happening, then the evaluation tool needs to change.
Yes. So we recognize that from school to school it looks very differently because principals have a certain autonomy around that person's time, and so we've had conversations where we've tried to talk to principals around maybe we need to identify someone else to support those teachers because that person may have just too much on their plate. Sometimes they're the testing coordinator. We have very few that are full-time release lead teachers, but even in that role, they may be also assuming a lot of roles in that building. We would love to have more influence on how that person spends their time and how this is actually practiced in the building. Right now, we are our locus of control or influence right now is sort of setting up the program so that mentors are getting sort of the learning so they are equipped to support teachers. Right now, we aren't able to impact that directly, sort of that relationship, but we do try to engage with principals. We have a series that we also provide during the year called The Role of the School Leader in supporting new teachers, and during that time we invite principals to come out. We held it twice last year, twice the year before last, and we invite principals to come out so we can have conversations with them around how do you structure your mentor time. what's the best way to sort of optimize this person in your building to support those new teachers. So we are trying to engage them in conversations that could help push them in that direction that we need to have those mentors being used effectively. But our office just doesn't have that direct control over how that person is and what's happening in the building.
In all transparency, I'm not standing here before you and saying that it's perfect in every single school. Just to piggyback off of what Dion's saying, I'm not standing here and saying every single mentor is perfect. Because the principal is designating that person, I don't necessarily have control over what happens with that person. But when it's brought to my attention, then I do try to make, within my locus of control, something to change in that aspect. But only when I know about it is when I can do something about it. So, for example, this year, New Teacher Summer Institute, I'll come back to you. I was in the rooms while they were going over the mentoring program and whatnot, and they said, who do we go to if we need, other sports or if we're not getting it? I said, you email me. And I gave my email out, and I said, if you need something, because I don't want any teacher in our district to feel like they're not being supported or they're by themselves or they're out there all alone. So I said, email me, and I want to know if you're not getting it. I need to know so I can make sure that happens for you. So, I'm not standing here saying, oh, it's perfect. Like I said, it's been a work in progress, and we're really trying, and there's 282 of them and one of me. So I'm trying to get to everybody as best I can, and I keep telling mentors if it's becoming too hard for you or if it's too much, you need to let me know that too so that we can figure out how to work around that. So, yes, you had a question.
I think you just hit on what I was concerned about, because as a parent advocate and a student advocate, you're saying that this one person has a class of their own to teach, and I only wrote down 2, I think you said 4. They have a staff developer as well as the mentoring piece, right? Yes. They can be a staff developer, a mentor. Yes, our responsibilities. But I'm just specifically trying to look at I think you named 4. Mm-hmm. So in the work that I've done in working with parents and teachers, that can be so overwhelming when you said if they need more help. But teachers are already inundated with so much. And if you're taking a person who is already a classroom instructor and giving them all of these, as a parent, I want to know my child is getting the best instruction possible in that building. And if you have a teacher who is going in 5 different directions and expected to do 100% in each one of those areas, where does the child, because my concern as an advocate is, does the child education suffer? By maybe the teacher not being, because I started a school at one point, and I can tell you that there were several teachers who were first-year teachers who should not have been in that classroom by themselves. So you had to have to do classroom management on top of that, and unless everything is orderly in these schools, which I don't think they are, that's another issue. So you have classroom management and all of these other things. And the concern would be, is my child getting the best instruction my child's entitled to get?
So I have two teenagers and 2 toddlers myself, so I completely understand where you're coming from in that realm. And my youngest, who just started first grade this year, actually has a first-year teacher in her class. Interesting irony there. Trying not to coach her from behind the scenes, but I can't help it. So I completely understand what you're saying and where you're coming from. And that is why the piece where we're trying to develop school leaders in the areas of understanding all the nuances of what's expected, we're trying to really make sure that people have a clear understanding of who you're choosing to put in front of the new teachers and someone who is able to do those types of things. And so because I've been doing this for a couple of years now, I'm able to see names on the list that I know. When I look at the roster of mentors, I know who these people are over the years. I've been with the city for 18 years, so I know those names. And I know those names who are also these things or that. So sometimes when I see a name that pops up, right away I'm like, are you going to have time to do all this? Are you going to be able to do what you need to do and do this? And I've had people come to me and say, you know what, I was chosen to do this, but I don't think I can. Because I want to make sure I'm doing this first. And that's fine. And I tell them there's no shame in that. It's knowing what comes first. And your classroom is always your first priority. We always tell them that too. but then also knowing that you're going to do the best you can be, but you cannot do everything, and it's not all on your shoulders. And so when we do professional development for the mentors, we really want to make sure, excuse me, that they understand all the resources they have in the district. So between our academic content liaisons, that's the one. So that's a district, that's a central office position. So each network of schools has that, and that's in math and literacy. So those people are also in the schools stationed there to help them specifically in those content areas. So even though you're a mentor for me, that doesn't mean that every single thing comes from you specifically. We try to understand that we have to collaborate, and it's going to take a village to help support this person, so it can't be just the mentor who is also doing their classroom and trying to do their best for their kids, but also understand that the mentors are a special group of people who want to do the very best for everybody. They're the ones that want to give to everybody. So they try the best for their class, and they're going to try their best for you too.
I only really have time for one more question. So go ahead.
So as a former mentor,
Yes.
and I can say that the training is excellent. It's absolutely superb. Is there any thinking then around, for those of us who retired, if we could come back to volunteer, to be able to, so you said yes? She said yes, come tomorrow.
No, she's being systemically.
Yes, I'm glad you said that, because I just had a conversation with Dr. Irma Johnson around maybe helping us to reconnect with some of the retired educators and how we could maybe leverage that resource to support schools. So yes, it is something we're thinking about.
Especially people like you who have been in our mentor program, been through our professional development, understand the framework and everything else.
I hate to cut us off. I'll move us forward a little bit, but you guys will have some time to talk about that if you choose the mentoring kind of working group. I would also encourage you while you're in that group to explore some of the things that Shauna and Deanna have shared with us, but also explore potentially the difference between mentoring and coaching, because having heard this myself, this sounds more like a coaching program, but we're calling it mentoring. And I only raise that because I know we've talked about career counseling and career ladder and things like that being important to people being offered by mentors, which sounds like a different service potentially. So just kind of elevating that so you guys can have a conversation about it. We're really grateful to have school leaders here today who've made time. We know how busy their lives are, and also you as teachers. And so we're grateful to have you. So maybe if you could all just, I hate to move you, but it would be great to just grab a chair and go sit up at the front. What we would love for you to just share broadly is kind of what you do specifically to recruit and retain school leaders of color, particularly black teachers. And we'll just kind of muse about that for about 10 minutes. I know that's not as much time as we'd like with you. Are you the only?
It's okay, you can handle it. You got
Oh, well, then you didn't have to move. No, thank you.
So I have, I think, a few familiar faces in the room. This is year 10 for me. So there were some lessons learned along the way. And I think this year as a school leader, every year has to be a reflective year. But one thing I know as far as recruiting, some of our best recruits have come from word of mouth. We have family on the back of our T-shirts for a reason, because it's a cross-stitching of support. Teacher mentors don't work in isolation. Teachers don't work in isolation. Heaven help us, the school leaders can't work in isolation. In order for the work to get done, we have to all communicate together. If you log on to our old website right now, I'm locked out of it, so it still says 1718, but my cell phone number is there. So everyone associated with our school has access to me 24/7, and they have never disrespected it. Our teacher mentors, one has retired and the other one was recently promoted. But again, the work that was done was, and you may be familiar with Mr. Brosine, so he's now a resident principal at the design school. He taught one class a day, and we have just added two more school leaders, so we now have 4. And so it starts at the root of what our students need, but we also have to be very open with what our adults need. And so our adults feeling like they can text me at night to say, something is going on with me personally, and sometimes they open that up. That's still mentoring. And so that relationship that is at the core of the work of what we do, especially in city schools, but in urban education across the board. I think if we start anywhere, it's about building relationships and having open communication and building trust. So when we talk about this mentoring piece and listening to the concerns, part of it is high turnover starting at the top. I always say that it takes probably at least 3 years for a school leader to have enough trust in the building. And so this, Forest Park is my second school. This is my 7th year here. But even while I was at BDJ, just in the 3rd year, now staff trust that you're not out to get them. You're really trying to support them. A PIP is not something that means I'm getting rid of you. Listen, that means you and I are going to work closer together, and I don't like to lose. So this is about we're working together so that you can be your best you. A conversation Assistant Principal Nathalie and I had with one of our science teachers today was a hard conversation that we have to make sure you have what you need. This is the 3 of us in my office. You have to have what you need so that you can shine. And you only shine when your students shine. And so getting to the root of the curriculum, but also the resources. We talk about pre-assessments and the data, but it's a learning process. But more importantly than that, it's a collaborative process that, again, is rooted in trust and open communication. And people not feeling like you're out to get them. But if I'm coming to you critically, but you also should feel open coming to me critically to say, I need. But we can't use those I needs as excuses for the work we have to do for children.
What does it mean for you to be a black female principal at Forest Park High School? And do you believe as a black principal or black teachers need something uniquely different than other teachers? And like when you think about yourself being a black principal, female principal, and you're interacting with your black teachers, is there something, and I'm just thinking about this Through Your Eyes report, like, I don't know if you've read it, but I have, and people talking about these relationships of trust and the expectation we have when we see somebody of our same racial identity. So if you could like sort of speak to that.
Sure. To be black in Baltimore City, I'll first speak of the experience. Now as an educator, but I've also been, I like to say I've covered almost every role in city schools. I've been a student, a parent of a city schools kid, a coach, a teacher, and now a school leader. So my perspectives kind of run the gamut. And it means something to our kids. Our kids, one, struggle in Baltimore City. The diversity is improving, but I know when I was growing up, Baltimore was black and white, you know, and we didn't get a lot of exposure. I grew up at a time where the elementary school was closed because it became too black. And so for middle school, they divided us. On this side of Patterson Avenue, you went to Woodlawn Middle, and on this side of Patterson Avenue, you went to Pikesville Middle. And so I was on the side that went to Pikesville Middle because they were trying to keep it integrated. They closed Sudbrook. They closed Campfield, they closed Sudbrook so that we could go to these 2 different middle schools. So it was a very different experience, and we didn't understand it as youth. But now being older and seeing how the neighborhood had changed and gentrification had taken place even in that small community, it was good to see people that looked like me. I remember my first year of college being very angry because all of the history and all of the social studies that I had learned through high school, I had only heard of the same people. I heard of Martin Luther King, Thurgood Marshall, Paul Laurence Dunbar. But when I got to college and took an African American history class, first I was angry, and then I became absorbed. So that now I have an African American library, and I collect African American art because I became hungry for what I felt was something that I was deprived of coming up through this public educational system. So fast forward to today, now being a school leader and looking into the eyes of, I want to say diverse, because we just hired one more black teacher, so I looked at our 47%. But I also am in my 2nd year of now having an ESOL population, so I have to make sure that I have students that look like my kids. So we have now 2 Hispanic teachers. I want our students to see the world. So when we talk about teacher recruitment, black teacher is important because I know I have felt forgotten. I still strongly believe that double negative, being a double negative, the salary for the glass ceiling piece, it's real. But it doesn't stop us from this work.
Group 1 about the exit survey and teachers who stay survey. One thing that came out was that you need to know before teachers leave that they're thinking about leaving and why are they thinking about leaving, and that a survey might not be the way that people want to share that there needs to be human interaction to maybe use the survey, but in an interview, or have someone to see, like, are you a good fit? Is this the good thing for you? What other pathways can they have for you? And we also heard that Baltimore County does their intent form in February, so that you have more time to figure out what is a good fit for keeping you in the district. And the second big thing that came out was about relationship building, that's key. If you have a good relationship with your leadership in your school, that if the adults are whole, then you can be whole for the children. Like, who are the helpful people in your building that can help you? It might not be the principal, it might be an ed associate, it might be someone, but that at the school level you need to have some sort of support system in place. And so we kind of went back and forth between structures and systems, like, should it be at the district level, should it be at the school level? How do you get this? Because it came up that teaching is a very isolating job, and you're in your classroom all day. So where do you get support?
A lot of the things that we talked about kind of matched what you all were saying. And something that's really important, I think, especially to teachers that teach in different areas, is the differentiation. So if you're a CTE teacher and you come in and you have not had any teaching training, but you're an expert in your trade, making sure that we have mentors here that can especially work with them. Or if you're a high school teacher, having mentors that are in your same certification area. A lot of the things, of course, that we were talking about are mandated, but how the district rolls them out is our option as long as we follow those mandates. So as far as accountability, having mentors have logs, having principals have logs. We also talked about principals coming in or going to training and making it mandatory. We know that principals had an optional training this year at the CEO's Academy, but really making training mandatory for principals because they need to know exactly what's expected and how they should operate with mentors in their school. Big thing is relationships, trust, addressing bias, not just bias with children, but bias that you might have with certain adults. Like, you might be a person that's like does not believe in those alternative programs, so you're automatically turned off by anybody that's in TFA or something like that. So just making sure that you address those. Another thing that came up, which I thought was a really good idea, is having retired teachers come back. And, if you think about it, I know a lot of retired teachers cannot make the same salary because of their retirement, et cetera. So we have all this experience out here, and we could bring them in because our biggest barrier was resources.
Okay. When we talk about bringing retired teachers back in, is there going to be some criteria? Because some retired teachers shouldn't come back yet.
Criteria be that just that you retired, or that there was something else?
So I think that the biggest theme that really peppered a bunch of different responses and solutions was this idea of information seeking, and people need more information. It needs to be two ways. So people need more clarity about when their certification expires and what exactly to do. People need more clarity about the different options that are available, because Praxis is not the only test that you can use to be certified in the state of Maryland. We talked about a couple different solutions. Praxis test prep during PD time. We talked about this group creating a response to the Kerwin Commission, because the proposals that they put forward for certification go in the complete opposite direction of what we're talking about in this room. And that's a whole nother conversation that I could really get into, but I'll spare you. We talked about the employee engagement team that is recently started in the Human Capital Office and how they can leverage the more labor-intensive outreach strategies to target the highest priority teachers. And then one idea that we kind of like dipped our toe into was if someone's certification is expired and they were offered kind of a temporary non-certified job with City Schools as perhaps a long-term sub, to give them 6 months to figure out who they owe money to, what credits they need, like what the blockage is. Like we kind of started talking about what that would look like, but we kind of quickly realized that like that involves other, I guess, departments and processes that also, that a streamlined process currently isn't happening there, right, with normal hiring. So we'd have to kind of create and think creatively about what streamlining that would mean so that if someone's certification expires on December 31st, when they come back from winter break on January 3rd, they're in that new position and their life is not substantially interrupted and they can actually use that 6 months to kind of figure out their certification as kind of like a safety net or a barrier. Is there anything else that we talked about? We talked a little bit about praxis and a PEP report, like the equivalent of a PEP report where it was available information like when your certification is up and whose certification is up. Because it takes a village, and sometimes the person who's checking it sees someone else on their floor and says, "Are you good? Do you need a class?" Like that can make a difference.
Yes. So I know we mentioned last time about having high school teachers getting incentivized to teach the practice math test, right? That's one of the most. So can we look into working BTU on how we can incentivize those high school teachers and provide that, since a lot of practice is high school math anyway, to help with some sessions throughout the year where they can actually come to certain schools, and then those schools or staff can get incentivized for what they're doing.
Well, the BTU is actually currently working on that. So we meet, I personally meet at North Avenue with people to discuss that on the 22nd.
I would say that Teach for America also has a model of doing praxis prep classes. They pay high school teachers and buy test prep materials for praxis prep specifically. So they've been doing that for a while as well, and they might be a good program to look at.
And I just want to add to that. I'm going to just keep being the person who's going to push the button about race. Like, it's not enough just to have a tutorer to help you with math, with the math part of the praxis. There are real reasons beyond just it's math that black teachers are not performing well on the praxis, and that's the part we have to get to as well. And so I want to push that, because the way we're talking about it right now, and any teacher, but like, what is the unique thing? Why are we having this focus group about black teacher recruitment and retention? And so when we think about the praxis and what we need to do in helping black people pass the praxis, it's more than just a tutorer that's needed. I mean, remember, like, these systems of oppression that we take into these environments with us, and those are things that we need work around and healing around so that you can begin to attack the test. So I just want to put that out there. Like, it's just not enough to have a tutorer.
I hear yes to all of that. Yes, and I hear there are some things that are fairly high impact and low effort that we could probably utilize existing resources and infrastructure to implement right away. Then we'll take all this back to the core team and Jeremy to really start thinking about what those are. And with maybe high school teachers supporting praxis instruction being one, as we then start to think about how we communicate to the policy wonks of our time, the folks who need to really be thinking about stereotype, threat, and some of those other things that are most vexing in some of the disparities we see. So I see us kind of taking steps to eradicate some of the small pieces, and then those small steps kind of leading us to where we need to be. So thank you for bringing us back to that, because that is the purpose of this group. Thank you all for kind of leaning in on what we need to do next.
I just wanted to ask for clarity. The Teach for America piece that was just mentioned, is that just for Teach for America teachers?
Correct.
Yes. Okay. Are they pulling in teachers from urban areas?
It depends. It depends. I don't have like data in front of me, and I don't speak on behalf of TFA or in defense of TFA as someone who grew up in LA in the 90s. But I would say that over time, there are far more teachers of color moving through Teach for America's program than weren't before. Now, some of them come from Middlebury, Vermont, too, but I'm just saying, do you know what I mean? I'm saying there is an effort to diversify, and I think there's a movement toward that. Whether or not that's immediately helpful in this moment, I don't know. So, Jeremy, if you could come and just close us by just transitioning and sharing what we'll be talking about next, the date of our next meeting, and I will be... I'll be emailing folks in the next couple of days, compiling all of this information, sending it to you. And the core team will get right to work. Core team, I'm starting to feel like we need to bring our committee idea back because we have a lot of work to do.
We sent a robocall out for this meeting. Angela said that she wants to follow up different or more. So if we have your email address, we can make sure, especially as we bring the 3-month process for this first topic to a close, we want to make sure that we can follow up with some closure for what we accomplished and what next steps are for this first topic. The next topic is encouraging our own city school students to become teachers. We heard that there's an interest in making sure we can do this. That's how tonight we heard from a couple people who were city school students before they became teachers here. And admittedly, the district is not doing anything like any comprehensive activity to get our own students to consider becoming teachers in the future. So our next meeting is October 16th, second Tuesday of the month, and I hope to see you there.